Hi, my name is Thomas and you're watching Casual DIY channel. In today's video I want to show you how you can tune up your mitre saw to get nice and accurate cuts. Check out the video. The saw I've got is a 10-inch sliding compound mitre saw. So what that means, it does mitres, it slides and does bevel cuts. In my case, it's a single bevel saw. To make sure that your saw will produce nice and accurate cuts, we need to make sure that everything's square. Alright then, so let's start. First of all, we'll have a look at the fence. Before you start messing around with your saw, make sure it's unplugged. In my case, as you can see, the fence is a one fence system. It seems to be like it's in two parts, but it's actually connected at the back. So what we need to establish is if the fence is square to the blade itself. With this particular saw, to adjust the fence, we've got bolt over here, and on the other side, similar thing, two bolts that are holding the whole fence of this saw. Make sure you've got a nice precise square for this job, and it is really important to have the right tools for this job. So now we're going to find out if the fence is square to the blade. Make sure that your square is not touching the teeth of the blade, as this may give incorrect readings. I've actually got an ability to lock the head in the down position, which makes this job a lot easier. Don't press on the blade too hard, as it may actually bend it slightly and give you inaccurate readings. From my reading, the blade is absolutely spot on. I can see the blade has no gaps between the square and the blade, which means it's at 90 degrees to the fence. To make sure that our reading is actually accurate, we're going to make a test cut. For my test cut, I'm using a 12mm plywood sheet, and we need to make sure that the edge that's going against the fence is nice and straight. If you can, try to use a piece that's long enough so it engages at least half of the capacity of cut of your mitre saw. Now I'm just going to select which side is going against the fence, and we'll make the cut. Now there's two ways we can check if the cut is nice and straight. The first one, that piece that we cut off, we flip it over like so, butt it up against the main piece and check if there are any gaps. And as you can see, there is no gaps at all. The cut is nice and square. The second option is to basically use a square. As you can see, we've got the arrows indicating that that piece was on the fence. This is the piece that we've cut off, so we'll use our square to see if there are any gaps. And as you can see, there's no gaps at all. Perfect 90-degree cut. If, for example, you had some gaps on your test piece at the front or at the back of your cut, what you can do, as mentioned before, my fence is one part fence, so I need to use this bolt on the left or the bolt at the right as the pivot point, depending on where the gap is. When you put your square against the fence and against your blade, if it's at the front of your blade or at the back of the blade, you then use accordingly the pivot point on the left or pivot point on the right and make the correct adjustments. So for example, we'll use the pivot point at the right hand side, so I would undo the rest 3 bolts just slightly, and the pivot point, just undo just a tiny little bit so the whole fence stays more or less stable. Now make the adjustments with the fence, holding your square to the blades and to the fence. Do up the bolts again. Check it for squareness again, as doing the bolts could introduce some error. And if in doubt, do the cut test again. Now that we are sure the fence is square to the blade, we need to make sure that the blade is square to the table of your saw. Place the square on the base of the saw and take it against the blade itself, making sure your square is not touching the teeth of your blade. Now by doing that, I can't actually see any gaps at the bottom or at the top of my blade, which indicates to me that the blade is square. However, we can also use this digital angle finder to confirm this. It would be a much better way of checking the squareness. So at the base, I've got 0 degrees. Place it on my blade and you can see it's spot on at 90 degrees. That indicates my blade is square to the table. However, if that wasn't the case, I'm going to show you how you can adjust that. At the back of this machine, I've got 2 positive stops on each side for bevel cuts, i.e. I can adjust it for 45 degrees on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you've got a positive stop for 0 degrees, which will indicate that the blade is straight to the base of your saw. Now if that wasn't true, if the blade it would not be square to the table of your saw, you would just need to adjust that positive stop over here. Depending on which side your blade is tilting to, you would have to raise that bolt or lower the bolt. It's a very easy operation. There's a nut holding the bolt in place, so we'll undo that slightly. You can now get the bolt higher or lower, depending on which way you need the blade to go. Each time you make the adjustment, take it to the positive stop and check your measurements. Now it's not accurate. I'll need to make some more adjustments. When you're happy with the results, lock the bolt in place. Now check it again to make sure you didn't change the position of the bolt. After all the adjustments, let's make a test cut. This time I'm indicating which side of the piece is going up, as we need to place it against the fence in a vertical position like so. And now we'll make our cut. Okay, let's check if we've got any gaps in this cut. And as you can see, no gaps at all. Nice and clean cut. Again, if you have been showing some gaps on this cut test, you'll go back to the setup and change that bolt the positive stop position until you get a nice and clean cut. Now with these adjustments made, where the blade is square to the table, the fence is square to the blade, the rest of the mitre cuts and the bevels, that all should fall into place and you should have no issues at all. So let's make a 45-degree mitre cut just to check out if everything's fine. There you go, perfect, 45 degrees. Now, as you've seen, setting up your mitre saw to produce nice and straight cuts is not actually as daunting or hard as you may have thought before. Obviously, I am just covering one particular mitre saw. However, most of the mitre saws will be fairly similar in how you can adjust the cuts and how to check it for squareness, the blade to the table, the fence to the blade as well, to make sure you've got a nice and precise cut. I hope this video was some help to you. If it was, drop me that like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well, as I am bringing a lot of videos with regards some basic information for beginners, DIYs and woodworkers on all the tools you can find in a normal workshop, how to use them, how to operate them and how to tune them up as well. So press that subscribe button, change the bell notification icon to all so you won't miss any of my future videos. But for now guys, that's all. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching. Take care.